Intro into
Welcome to another episode of the Relationship Toolbox, a show about the skills we need to build healthy relationships with others. What do you do when a close friend unexpectedly states a very strong opinion that you passionately disagree with? What do you say when your spouse or your partner shares a view that is the exact opposite of what you believe? What do you do when you're in a group and someone repeatedly makes inaccurate comments about events they know nothing about? And what do you do when you share a point of view with your friend and the friend verbally attacks you for what you are saying? Dealing with these common occurrences will be the subject of what we want to talk with you today. So in order to do this, I guess to make it more realistic, we need to put sort of a role play idea out there of what we can react to.
Since we're talking about process, it really doesn't matter what we plug in, but it will make it more real. So
sure.
What do you have in mind?
So what I'm thinking of is, let's suppose that a friend of mine, I see something on the news and it's kind of important to me. I want to talk about it with my friend. And so I mentioned this to my friend and say, you know, did you see this and so forth? And I start talking, thinking I'm going to get a response of, what did you think about that? And instead, my friend responds with, oh, you're foolish to believe anything you see on the news these days. You know, that it's all biased anyway. It's just there to get viewer attention and to bring in the sponsors. So now I'm feeling like, whoa, not only do I have sort of put the brakes on in terms of, can I share this or not, but now I feel sort of belittled, maybe embarrassed, humiliated by someone implying that I am foolish to have even taken it seriously.
Yeah, so you're really off guard and kind of disappointed because we process things out loud a lot. And
yes. And that's what I wanted with a friend, yes.
But it is increasingly more difficult to know what we can talk about with people because we don't know how to do it anymore. We don't have that sandbox where we can engage and still come out friends.
Right.
So.
Plus, we seem to be in a sort of reactionary time when it's more likely that will occur.
Well, I think not only because of the backdrop of contemporary events, but we've also lost our practice because we've been isolated for so long.
Yes.
That we've lost that muscle tone, you know, the talking, how to have a civil dialogue with somebody because we haven't done it in a year and a half, really. Right. So we need to re-practice and maybe reset because we might not have had the skills to begin with.
That's true.
And I know. I mean, I find myself like going, what? Are you kidding? Sometimes out loud and sometimes in my head. And then like, okay, what do you do now? Right. So what do we do?
I think the times, too, are sort of hurt our tolerance for this right now. That I feel now after going through this year of the COVID and so forth, that sometimes my tolerance is less than what it was before.
Well, we're very opinionated. We haven't been tempered by interaction with other people. And the world is upside down right now.
Kind of polarized with things.
And there might even be some truth in what your friend said. So, but you have to tease it out.
Right. So the first thing that I need to do is to begin to start regulating myself. Because if I'm not careful, I'm going to be triggered by this. Yeah. And I'm going to do something that I might say something, do something that I might regret. And it's going to harm the relationship. And I don't want to do that. So if I'm not careful, I could do that. I could fall into that very quickly. So the first thing I guess I need to do is to become aware, become mindful of the fact that I have been triggered.
Right.
You know,
We almost need a mantra to remind ourselves, because that is that's the impulse.
Yes.
To react.
And we don't think about it. It just happens.
You're just like in it, like you're making a judgment.
Right.
Not unlike when we've talked about the conflict cycle. That somebody does something that's a triggering factor, and we react with feelings and thoughts and behavior.
Any further thought to it.
Without questioning it.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of that too.
Yeah, I think we all are. It can happen quickly. So that's, ideally, that's the first thing I need to do, is to become aware of, oops, that really triggered something.
I think it's hard because we disconnect our mind from the rest of us. That regulation isn't a practice that I have done until lately.
Yeah, same here, until I became more aware of this field of communication. So once I hopefully become aware, whoops, I am triggered by this thing, it would be important to, if I can, to identify what feeling it is. And if I'm angry, anger usually covers up, we've talked about this before, it usually is a disguise for another emotion that's underlying it. So it might be the embarrassment that I'm experiencing, or somebody thinking that I'm foolish because I believe something.
So it's your identity is at risk here.
Yes, yeah.
Also, the fear of the risk of, oh my gosh, I've stepped in this, and now this is my friend, this is my colleague, this is my coworker. I have an ongoing relationship with this person, and I'm in.
Yes.
What now?
What have I triggered?
How do I navigate this?
Yeah. So having done that, if I can, I need to go to some stress reduction methods.
Yeah.
Again, this is where the understanding of communication skills comes into play, because if we're aware of them, we're more likely to turn to those. And especially if we practice them.
I think practice is
That's
important,
the key, isn't it?
because I don't naturally do this. I naturally react.
Yeah, we all do, I think, and that's the problem.
I need to practice.
Yeah.
I need to stop, slow down, and practice. So.
I think we're all in that kind of that same boat. So one of the things that I might do to try to get myself, let's take a moment here, is go to mindful breathing. And I think we've all heard of this, count to 10 or whatever, that's another tactic. But just to switch my focus to breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, it changes my ability to stay kind of in my cognitive ability and not just react to the part of the brain that doesn't think. It just reacts.
Well, it even makes reliable communication easier, because, as you say, you can be in your brain instead of in your body, with like a fight or flight kind of impulse.
Yes.
Like I'm gonna go after you. Think of how many times, if you don't self-regulate, you can't speak. And you raise your voice to compensate for the fact that you can't speak, or
the
you
words
say things.
don't come to me, so I become physical about it.
Physical or accusatory, or just with an edge to it, because you're trying to conquer the conversation, and you're at a disadvantage because you're not self-regulated.
Well, and those feelings are going to come out if I'm not careful.
So mindful breathing, I know, it sounds like cliched, like touchy-feely stuff, but it works.
It does work, yes.
It works.
It works. Another thing that I can do is what they call attention shifting. So I'm diverting my attention. I might begin to look at something in the room and begin to focus on that with it. Again, it buys some time, it calms me down a little bit, so I can stay in that part of my brain that can begin to work with this and say, how do I want to respond to this? Another way similar to that, is sort of cognitive reframing.
Right.
So the first thing that really helps a lot, if one can do it, is to assume the best intention of the other party, rather than I know what she's up to, or I know what her motivation is.
Stupid, or that's wrong.
How dare you do this to me? So if we possibly can say, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt in my mind, and I'm going to assume the best intention. That might calm things down a little bit. So, and another that goes along with this is looking at the situation from a different point of view. Well, maybe this other person hasn't had the experience that I have had, and therefore, from her experience, it looks this way. but I might have had more time working maybe with news people and so forth, and have a type of respect for them that she might not have known.
So that's something we've talked about in conflict, just allowing for another perspective.
Yes.
And that alone is a gift to the conversation.
Right. In this case, it's changing my perspective rather than trying to find out the other party's perspective. Another thing is sort of taking a timeout moment to kind of move back and take a deep breath, again, the breathing part of it, and visualize in my mind what is the way I would like to respond to this where I would respect myself, where I wouldn't later say, oh my gosh, I must have looked foolish doing that, or I should never have said that.
Said that because you can't take it back once it's said.
Yeah. So if I begin to visualize how it would look if I'm responding more respectfully, and with some of the skills you're going to be talking about in a minute, that's another way of getting this under control and of stress reduction. A way that can happen is if I know my friend well, I might be able to figure out ahead of time and think ahead of time, knowing how she feels about things or has made statements in the past about news, that type of thing. Is this something that I really want to bring up to her and to discuss?
Ahead of time, before you even open your mouth.
So I'm thinking about this prior to that situation, or I might say, yes, I want to bring it up, but I'm ready, knowing her sensitivities. I'm knowing that it might not go the way I want, so I'll get myself prepared to do those stress reduction
You kind of get into a cycle in that you want to be able to talk about these things with people, but you're afraid, so you don't do it, but then you don't have the practice, and with practice you can do better at it.
Yes.
So
practice provides the opportunity, and also, should it go bad, it provides the means for getting out of that situation.
And it sounds like a lot of steps, but again, if we think about it and practice it, then it becomes more automatic and less like a checklist. Oh, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. But right now it may seem like procedural.
Right.
Like, okay, I have to stop, I have to breathe, I have to think. Why is this important? You know.
Yeah, it's very self-defeating to think of those things afterward.
Right. I should have stopped. I should have figured this out, but
And then you end up probably being more on the apology mode, being able to say, I'm sorry I reacted that way, and now you're saying the things I should have done these things with it. But how much nicer it would be for the relationship if I thought about that ahead of time and was prepared to carry out those things should I need to.
And we don't think about it being about us because we're reacting to something that has confronted us. So we think it's about the other person. But a good, proper start really starts here. Like, okay, I'm going to bring my best self to this conversation, my most thoughtful, most reflective, most intelligent, most patient, kindest self. And in order to do that, I got to prepare myself.
Right.
Instead of just launching, because then it's like, oops.
And if I can think about it at the time, I might be able to reflect on, why was that so triggering for me? You know, why am I getting so agitated about this with it? And that might help. That might help in changing the point of view a little bit with it. So these are all ways of kind of decompressing.
Self-regulated.
Self-regulating, yes.
So after you've kind of prepared yourself and ratcheted yourself back, you want to check in to make sure that what you perceive you heard is what the person intended and what they said. Because we make assumptions, we make inferences, we jump to conclusions, we hear partial truths and partial statements. So then you're prepared to say, you know, I just want to check in, or I want to confirm, did I hear you say blah, blah, blah?
Because you still want to stay engaged with the person. It's not silence, and you're wondering, well, what's happened here? You want to stay engaged with them, so this would be a method of
but I want to make sure that we're engaged about the same things.
Yes.
I have occasionally been having parallel conversations with people because I don't know that, I think I know what we're talking about, and they're talking about something else, and then we get to a place, not necessarily in conflict, but like, wait a minute,
Yes.
What are you talking about? I'm talking about this. So this would be really important, particularly if it's a little prickly, to be sure you're talking about the same thing and you have an understanding. So, you can say, do I understand that you're saying that, in this case, that you don't trust any news sources? Is that what you're saying? Or that your belief is that this is all contrived and biased and commercialized? Is that what you're saying?
And that allows that person to reflect a little bit too on, is that really what I believe? Maybe it wasn't intended.
Because in the moment, they may have been like speaking in exaggerations as well. But they'll, like in any kind of, that's that reflective listening that we're talking about. This is what I heard. Is this what you think you said? And is this clear? It does clarify that we're talking about the same thing. And so you can paraphrase or reflect back and ask for verification before you go any further.
Right. And that can lead to a fair discussion even before anything else happens. There may be a lot that person has to share. I think one has to accept that, gee, I brought this up so I could talk about it, and now this is ending up you talking about it with it. But if we can accept that, maybe this is what's going to lead to some more understanding, both for me and for the friend that I'm trying to talk to.
New understanding. And even this second stage of clarification, reflective listening, is still kind of buffering me from my initial reaction.
Yes.
I'm regulating myself. I'm checking in to make sure we're talking about the same topic. Then I can ask you questions.
Right.
Okay. So in my mind, I'm thinking, this was startling. I didn't expect this. So there's more I need to understand. So, could you tell me more?
Right.
That's hard sometimes when you're convinced that your perspective is right.
Right, especially if the question that you're asking implies that, why would you think that? So it's really in the form of a criticism rather than tell me more about it. It really is in the form of, oh yeah, well tell me more about that.
Right, tone's going to be important. But it's like, get your curiosity on, your sincere, genuine curiosity, not just that I have to say this, I'm going through the motions to care about your perspective, but no, really. You're my friend, you're my coworker, you're a member of my family or whatever, a professional relationship. I want to understand now and maybe for the next conversation. So tell me more. Help me understand. What in your life, what is your life experience that influenced you to have this perspective and this conclusion? That, I think, is really important because it honors the person.
Yes.
And like when we talked about I statements, when we're talking from our point of view about our feelings and how something affects us, instead of saying you should believe this or you, it's honest, it's authentic, and I can't quibble with your life experience.
Right.
Your life experience is valid.
It honors that that's where your point of view might be coming from.
And it may tell me a lot.
Yes, yes.
Like, oh, well, given that experience, I can understand why you hold that view.
Right. Even sometimes being able to admit, if I had gone through that experience, I think I might have
feel
felt
the same
way
way.
too.
If,
So it's a wonderful way of engaging as well as diffusing and keeping it from going in a direction that could really hurt the relationship, so that people can learn from that. I think that another question that I might be curious about is sort of this something that you have always felt? Or was there a time when you felt that you could believe what you were hearing on the news?
Right.
And if there was a time when you could, what has changed?
What changed, that would pinpoint, maybe amplify that life experience that they were having. Sometimes we draw on vicarious life experiences of others, which can invalidate that first person. Well, so-and-so told me. And then you understand where they're coming from, and that, well, maybe it isn't a personal experience, and they might be open to hearing other perspectives later in your conversation.
Right. So if they referred back to, well, my mother always said that this was true.
Okay.
Oh, what was your mother's experience with this?
Yeah.
You know, and it might bring out the fact that there's been an automatic assumption of what the mother said was truthful at that time, which it may have been, I don't know, but there might be a different way of looking at it now. So just by getting that clarification, it opens it up a little bit. But a real temptation would be, as the listener who has been offended by this response, would be not to attack that then.
Right.
Your mother told you? Oh, well, that's real valid. You know,
Like,
that would be
well,
a way of put down, and then we.
Then boom, you're out. But even as you were asking that, I realized that this is really a tightrope, because we want to be careful that we're, again, not going through the motions to get enough information to just be ammunition for our rebuttal.
Yeah, to zing something in there.
You know, like, oh, tell me more. Just, you know, to kind of like trap them in something. Right. You have to be sincerely open to another person's perspective, other life experiences. And then when you think you understand, you can say, I get it. Okay. I have had different experiences. Would you mind, can I tell you my experiences? Right. And
especially if, as you say, you have, before you move to that position, that you have summarized what you feel you now understand, both from the statements that the friend has made, but also from their experiences they've shared with you. So it's a way of kind of easing their tendency to trigger as well.
Because they feel understood.
They feel understood
and, again,
and heard.
You don't have to agree to honor somebody's perspective.
Right.
Just like in our conversations in conflict. But you need to do that before you understand what the conflict is. So, and you can kind of diffuse it if you ask as many questions as you need for that person to feel heard and for you to understand. You can still disagree.
Because the opposite of that would be an attack on the person, and that's where the relationship goes to pieces with it, and that can be hard to recover from.
Right. Or not asking enough clarifying questions or allowing them to present their point of view before you start rebutting.
Yes.
Because I mean, sometimes we're wrong, and we might learn something in listening, or at least kind of make this a better exchange.
Right.
Take some of the toxicity out of it.
Or be able to differentiate and say, there are times, come to think of it, when there's been sort of a distortion of the news.
Find that Venn diagram between what you believe and what I believe, and I can acknowledge that there is some truth in that statement. And I can even say, you know, yeah, I understand what you're saying about things being biased and you can't trust it, because I've been at occasions and then I read stories about the event and I think, wow,
I know it to be different.
That was dramatically different than the way I experienced it. So you wonder. Or
we might even differentiate the news stations. We might say, you know, there's some stations I think I would feel about what you're saying about this. Other stations I feel there's more integrity there. So and then you're into a different well, how do you determine that?
But I think that overlap, you can almost always find something that you can acknowledge, a kernel of truth or a kernel of something that you can agree on.
With, yes.
Yeah. And that is honest, and it maintains the bond, I think, as well.
It can change the whole nature of the following discussion.
Also, remember how you felt at the beginning of the conversation. As the conversation unrolls, that other person may start feeling dysregulated and feel like this is an uncomfortable conversation. And when you're offering areas where you can agree on something, or you can concede, then I would think that serves to help the other person regulate and not feel threatened as well. Yes. And I'm more willing to listen if somebody is pointing out the truths in my perspective too.
So you were talking about then if you reach the point where can you make the leap or the transition to...
You've done that, you've explored it all, and it's like, well, I've had a different experience. And do you mind if I tell you about mine and my point of view? And so we've acknowledged that we have it. It's different, but valid. We're out of the trap of saying, I'm right, you're wrong, or vice versa. And I have acknowledged that there might be some commonalities, or in your position, I could understand. And that I'm really glad that we have found a way to talk about this.
Yes.
And I'd like to talk about it again, and you know, honoring the process and the continuing relationship that you want to have, and the respectful way that you've been able to talk with each other.
And you mentioned or just alluded to another method of kind of regulating the whole relationship, and that is to postpone it, to be able to say, wow, I guess we have some differences here, some strong opinions on it. I would like to talk with you about it, but let's do something else right now.
And we'll come back to it just like you would, you know, in another relationship over conflict. You can kind of prospect it as much as you can in the moment, and then promise to go back. Or I want to learn more about this before we continue.
Or you might decide, I guess I didn't choose the right person to talk about this with, and the subject is dropped.
But you hopefully haven't burned a bridge. Because you've done the self-regulation, you've clarified, you've been curious and gotten more information, you've been able to share your point of view.
And no one has been personally attacked.
The character in the relationship. So it can be about the news, it could be about zoning, it could be about you know, dog parks. Any topic can be handled this way.
It's hard not to think of an issue these days where people can disagree.
But instead of just kind of combating and you know, trading one-liners or raising our voice or making barbed remarks, this might be a framework that you can hang how to deal with a potential disagreement.
Another factor I'm thinking about too is it might not even be someone you have a personal relationship with. It might be someone just brought this up, and rather than just going off on that person, you show yourself as having integrity, using these skills and respecting the person, which goes a long way to keep people from getting polarized.
And you're going to feel better about who you were. And you may not know that person intimately, but it's a small community. Or whatever community you're in. Whether it's a school, a business, a town. So I hope that you have enjoyed us talking about the framework of and the architecture of talking about things that you might disagree with. And we invite you to join us again on the Relationship Toolbox.